The billionaire couldn't believe his eyes. A little girl no older than 7 was wiping his car window with a rag. As she worked, she softly whispered, "My little brother needs milk." He stopped, confused and startled. Who was this child, and why was she out here in the heat doing this? He watched her, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The streets around them were dirty, the kind of place you'd never expect a child like her to be. She wasn't just wiping his window, she was doing it with determination, as if every wipe mattered. She wasn't asking for money, no. She was doing it because she had no other choice. "I just want to buy milk for my little brother," she whispered again, as if hoping the words would reach someone who could help. The billionaire felt something stir inside him. It wasn't just the shock of seeing a child work so hard on the streets, it was the sincerity in her voice. This wasn't a game. This was survival. He sat in his car, paralyzed for a moment, trying to understand how someone so young could be faced with such hardship. How could a little girl like her be out here cleaning car windows just to get by? The question lingered in his mind as he looked at her, still wiping, still whispering her quiet plea. And as he sat there, the truth began to unfold in front of him. This was no ordinary street encounter. This was a moment that would change everything for him. I cannot imagine what was going through the billionaire's mind as he watched that little girl, no older than 7, wiping the dirt off his car window. It wasn't just the act itself that caught his attention, but the quiet desperation in her voice as she muttered, "My little brother needs milk." He had to know more. He rolled down his window, leaning out just enough to catch her eye. "Hey," he said softly. "What's your name?" The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide but tired, as if the weight of the world rested on her small shoulders. "Madison," she replied, her voice barely audible, her hands still moving over the window. "And my brother Jack? He's sick. He needs milk." The billionaire's heart sank. He was about to ask her more when Madison continued, "We don't have enough. I'm just trying to get him some." Her words hit him harder than he expected. Here was a child not asking for handouts, but fighting to survive in a world that seemed indifferent to her struggle. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his curiosity growing with each passing second. "Because my brother needs it," she answered simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "He's too little to know what's going on. I need to make sure he's okay." The billionaire was stunned. He had everything: money, power, influence. And here was a little girl alone in the world, doing whatever it took to care for her family. For a moment he felt helpless. His thoughts raced, trying to figure out what he could possibly do to help. But all he could do was sit there, frozen in place, watching the little girl wipe his window, silently pleading for help. The billionaire sat in his car, unable to move, unable to speak. Madison was still wiping his window, her hands moving mechanically over the glass. The car was now spotless, but she kept going as if she didn't even realize he was still there. He could hardly believe what he was witnessing. How had her life become so hard? Why was a child forced to be out here in the street doing such an exhausting task just to care for her sick brother? His thoughts were interrupted when Madison finally stopped. She stepped back and looked up at him, her tired eyes meeting his. For a brief moment she seemed unsure whether she had done enough to please him. "How much do you need?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Madison looked confused for a moment, then replied, "Just a few dollars. For the milk." It was such a simple request, but it felt so much bigger in that moment. The billionaire, feeling an overwhelming sense of responsibility, got out of the car and walked towards her. "Come with me," he said softly. Madison blinked, surprised. She wasn't sure if she had heard him correctly. "Come with me," he repeated, this time with more urgency. The child hesitated, glancing back at her little sister Lily, who was sitting nearby watching from the sidewalk. "I can't leave her," Madison said quietly. The billionaire followed her gaze, seeing the small girl sitting with her doll, looking completely unaware of the world around her. Without another word, he pulled out his wallet and handed Madison a few $100 bills. "Take this," he said. "Go get your brother the milk and more if you need it. I will help you. You don't have to do this alone." Madison stood still for a moment, unsure how to react. Then slowly she took the money, her eyes filling with tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The billionaire watched as she turned and ran down the street, her small figure disappearing into the distance. He stood there stunned as the weight of the moment sank in. He had just witnessed the purest form of love and sacrifice, and it had left him speechless. The billionaire watched as Madison disappeared down the street, the weight of her footsteps growing fainter with each passing second. He stood there for a moment, still processing everything that had just happened. What had started as a simple encounter had turned into something far deeper than he could have imagined. He felt a strange mix of guilt and admiration. He had so much in his life, luxury, comfort, and security, and yet here was a little girl doing whatever it took to take care of her sick brother. He could not help but think about the contrast between their worlds. Madison was not asking for much. She wasn't begging for charity. She wasn't demanding anything. She was just trying to survive, trying to help her family in the only way she knew how. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how little he truly understood the struggles of people like Madison. He had spent so much of his life surrounded by wealth and privilege, but this encounter was opening his eyes to the harsh realities that so many others faced every day. He wondered what else he could do. Was handing her the money enough? Was there more that he could offer? His mind raced as he got back into the car, starting the engine. He couldn't just let this go. The thought of Madison running off to buy milk for her sick brother haunted him. He knew he needed to do something more, something lasting. He wasn't sure what that would look like yet, but he knew that he couldn't let her struggle alone. As he drove away, he promised himself that he would do everything he could to make sure no child ever had to go through what Madison and her brother were enduring. He had the power to make a difference, and he wasn't going to waste it. The next morning, the billionaire found himself unable to shake the image of Madison and her little brother. He couldn't stop thinking about their struggle, about how something so simple, a glass of milk, could become a mountain for a child to climb. He knew he had to do something more. He couldn't just hand over money and walk away. That was not enough. He made a decision. He would visit Madison and her family. He needed to see for himself what their lives were like, and he wanted to make sure they had the support they needed. It wasn't just about the milk. It was about giving them a chance, a way out of the cycle of poverty they were trapped in. He drove through the neighborhood once again, this time with a sense of purpose. He arrived at the small apartment complex where Madison lived. It wasn't much, just a few rundown buildings, the kind of place that felt forgotten by the world. He parked his car and got out, walking towards the entrance. The air was thick with the scent of dampness and old wood, and the walls were cracked and peeling. He knocked on the door of Madison's apartment. A moment later, the door opened, and there stood Madison, her eyes wide with surprise when she saw him. "Mr. Stone," she said, her voice trembling slightly. He nodded and smiled gently. "I've come to help," he said simply. Madison stepped aside, letting him in. Inside the apartment was small and sparsely furnished, with a few toys scattered around the floor. Lily was sitting on the couch playing with a doll, her face serious and focused. And then, in the corner of the room, was Jack, lying on a makeshift bed, looking pale and weak. The sight of him made the billionaire's heart ache. He approached the boy slowly, his mind racing with thoughts of what he could do to help. He had the resources to change their lives, but he knew that he couldn't fix everything in one day. Still, he was determined to start somewhere, to make a real difference. "How is he?" he asked, his voice soft. Madison looked up, her eyes filled with worry. "He's not getting better. We don't have enough for the doctor." The billionaire knew in that moment that he had to do everything in his power to help this family. It was time to make good on his promise. The billionaire stood in the small apartment, his eyes scanning the room. It was clear that this was not a place of comfort or warmth. The walls were bare, the furniture was old and worn, and the air was heavy with the scent of illness. Jack the young boy lay in the corner, his small body weak and pale, covered in a thin blanket. Madison stood by his side, her hands wringing together nervously, and Lily sat quietly on the couch, her doll resting in her lap. The silence in the room was deafening. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes, the kind that echoed with struggle and desperation. The billionaire could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. He had seen hardship before, but never like this. The family's poverty was tangible, and the suffering was written across their faces. He looked at Jack, his tiny chest rising and falling weakly, and his heart tightened. The boy needed medical attention, but there was no money for a doctor, no way to get the treatment he desperately required. The billionaire couldn't stand it. He had the resources, the means to help, but he had to know what the family needed most. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his voice soft, his heart heavy with empathy. Madison glanced at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "We just need help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do. I've tried everything." The billionaire nodded slowly, his mind already working through the possibilities. He could give them money for medical bills, but that wasn't enough. This family needed more. They needed stability. They needed support. They needed a future. "I'm going to take care of Jack," he said firmly. "I'll make sure he gets the medical attention he needs. And I'm going to make sure you and your family have everything you need from now on." Madison looked at him in disbelief, her lips trembling as she tried to hold back tears. You will?" she asked, her voice cracking. The billionaire nodded. "I promise." He turned to leave, but before he stepped out the door, he paused. "I'm going to set up a trust for you," he said, his voice steady. "I'll make sure that you never have to worry about money again. You'll be taken care of, all of you." Madison's tears finally broke free, streaming down her face as she looked at him, speechless. The billionaire gave her a soft, reassuring smile before stepping out, his mind already planning the next steps. He knew this was just the beginning. He had seen their struggle, and now it was time to change everything for them. He would give them a chance to live without fear, a chance to build a new life. The days that followed were a whirlwind of changes. The billionaire kept his promise. Jack was taken to the best hospital in the city, where doctors quickly diagnosed him with a severe but treatable condition. Within a week, he was stable and on the road to recovery. But it was not just Jack's health that was improving. The billionaire set up a trust fund for Madison and her family, ensuring they had the financial support they needed for the long term. He also arranged for a counselor to visit their home regularly, to provide emotional support and help them adjust to their new circumstances. Madison was overwhelmed by the kindness and generosity she had received. It was hard for her to believe that someone so rich, someone she had never met before, would care so much about her family. She had grown up in a world where kindness was rare, where every day was a struggle to survive. But now things were changing. Slowly, she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for them after all. As for the billionaire, he couldn't stop thinking about Madison and her family. Every time he saw them, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to make a difference. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the chance to show them that they were not invisible, that they mattered. Over the next few months, he continued to visit their apartment, checking in on Jack's progress, and making sure the family had everything they needed. Madison had started a part-time job at a local grocery store, and while it wasn't much, it was a step towards independence. The family was no longer living in fear of what tomorrow might bring. For the first time in years, they had hope. One evening, as Madison was sitting with Lily and Jack, She looked out the window and thought about how far they had come. It wasn't just the money that had changed their lives, it was the belief that someone cared, that someone was willing to help. And that she realized was the greatest gift of all. As months went by, Madison and her family started to adjust to their new life. Jack, who had once been too weak to play, was now running around the apartment full of energy and laughter. His recovery had been a miracle thanks to the billionaire's timely intervention. Madison had grown more confident, taking pride in her new job at the grocery store. And slowly but surely, she began to save up for the future. The pressure to survive every day was no longer hanging over her head like a dark cloud. She felt a sense of security she had never known before, and it allowed her to dream. She started to think about what she could do next, what she could do for herself, for her family. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. The change didn't go unnoticed by her neighbors who had once looked at her with pity. Now they saw a young woman standing tall, a woman with hope in her eyes. She wasn't the same girl who had been on the streets begging for help. She had taken control of her life, and that gave others a sense of hope too. The billionaire, for his part, continued to check in on them, always making sure they had what they needed. His visits became less frequent, but Madison knew he would always be there if they needed him. It was a silent promise, one that meant more than any check he could write. One afternoon, as Madison was walking home from work, she spotted him across the street waiting by his car. He smiled when he saw her and waved. She walked over, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I just wanted to see how you're doing," he said, his voice warm. Madison smiled back, feeling the weight of everything that had changed in her life. "We're doing great," she said, her voice steady and confident. "I'm doing great. Jack's doing great. We're finally okay." The billionaire nodded, his eyes full of pride. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "You've come a long way." Madison couldn't help but feel a lump in her throat as she thought about how far they had come, how different their lives were now. It wasn't just the money, she realized. It was the belief that someone had cared, that someone had seen them. That had made all the difference. As she stood there talking to the billionaire, she knew that the future was no longer uncertain. It was bright, and it was theirs to build. She had hope now, and hope was everything. As the months passed, Madison's life continued to blossom in ways she never could have imagined. The trust fund set up by the billionaire was more than just financial support. It had given her a sense of stability she had never known. Jack's health improved every day, and he was soon back to his energetic self, laughing and playing with Lily in ways that brought joy to the entire apartment. Madison had settled into a routine, balancing her part-time job with taking care of her family, and for the first time in years, she was able to think about her own future. The financial support had made a world of difference, but it was the knowledge that she was not alone that truly changed everything. Madison started taking evening classes at a local community college, something she had always dreamed of but never had the opportunity to pursue. She had always wanted to become a teacher, to make a difference in the lives of other children like Jack, and now, with the help of the billionaire, that dream was becoming a reality. The grocery store job was still part of her life, but it no longer defined her. She was building a future for herself and her family, one step at a time. It wasn't easy. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed, but she knew she was doing something important. With every class she attended, every lesson she learned, she was getting closer to her goal. Meanwhile, the billionaire continued to check in on them, but his visits were less frequent. He had made sure they were on the right path, but now it was time for them to stand on their own. He was always just a phone call away if they needed him, but Madison had gained enough confidence to know that she could handle whatever came their way. One afternoon, Madison received an unexpected call. It was from the billionaire. "I just wanted to check in," he said. "How's everything going?" Madison smiled, her heart full of gratitude. "It's going great," she said. "Jack's doing well. I'm taking classes and things are really starting to look up." "I'm glad to hear that," he replied. "You've worked hard for this. I knew you had it in you." Madison paused for a moment, her eyes misting over. I don't think I could have done it without you, she said quietly. The billionaire's voice softened. You've done the work, Madison. All I did was give you a little help when you needed it. The rest was all you. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought about everything the billionaire had done for her and her family. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the belief he had shown in her when no one else had. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. There was a pause on the other end of the line before he spoke again. You don't have to thank me. You've earned this. As Madison hung up the phone, she felt a deep sense of pride. She had come so far. She had found her strength, and with it a future she could finally look forward to. The road ahead was still long, but she knew now that no matter what came her way, she had the power to overcome it. She had the support of her family, and she had hope for a life that was brighter than anything she had ever imagined. It had been over a year since Madison had first crossed paths with the billionaire, and so much had changed. Her life, once filled with struggle and uncertainty, now had a sense of stability and purpose that she had never dreamed of. Jack was thriving, his laughter filling the apartment every day as he ran around with Lily, who had also blossomed into a bright, joyful little girl. Madison had completed her first semester of college, and although it wasn't easy balancing schoolwork and caring for her family, she felt more empowered than ever before. The trust fund, the support from the billionaire, and the opportunities she now had given her a sense of direction she had never imagined. She was no longer just fighting to survive. She was building something for herself, a future she could be proud of. One day, as Madison sat in the small living room doing homework, while Jack and Lily played nearby, there was a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Hesitant, she got up and opened it to find the billionaire standing there, a warm smile on his face. "Hi, Madison," he said, his voice kind. "I thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing." She blinked, surprised but grateful. "Mr. Stone, what a surprise. We're doing well, really well. Come on in." He stepped inside, looking around the apartment, clearly impressed by the changes. The place was cleaner, brighter, and Madison had taken steps to make it more of a home. "I see things are going well," he remarked, his eyes scanning the room. "You've come a long way." Madison smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "It's all thanks to you," she said softly. "You gave us a chance. I don't know how we can ever repay you." The billionaire shook his head, his expression serious but gentle. "You don't need to repay me. What you've done for yourself and your family, that's the reward. You took the opportunity and made something of it." Madison's eyes welled up with tears as she looked at him. "I never imagined I would get this far. I was just trying to get through each day before, but now..." Her voice broke slightly. "Now I'm planning for the future." The billionaire's smile softened and he stepped closer to her. "I always knew you had it in you, Madison. You've worked hard, and now you're on a path that's yours to choose. I'm proud of you." Madison felt a lump in her throat. She had come so far, and it wasn't just the money, the trust fund, or the support. It was the belief in herself that had made all the difference. She had learned that with hard work and a little help, she could overcome any challenge. She had a future now, and it was hers to shape. The billionaire stayed for a while longer, chatting with Madison about her studies, her dreams, and her plans for the future. He was no longer just the man who had helped them. He was a friend, a mentor. When he finally left, Madison stood at the door watching him walk down the hallway. She had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time they spoke, but more importantly, she realized that the true gift he had given her was the chance to believe in herself again. She had everything she needed to succeed, and now she was ready to face whatever came next, knowing she had the power to make it happen. As the years passed, Madison's life continued to transform in ways that felt almost like a dream. She had graduated from community college with a degree in education, and now she was teaching at a local elementary school. It had taken a lot of hard work, late nights, and sacrifices, but it was all worth it. Jack, now healthy and thriving, had started attending school as well, and he was doing well, making new friends and growing more confident with each passing day. Lily, too, had blossomed into a bright and curious little girl. Madison was able to provide for her family in ways she never thought possible. The financial strain that had once weighed so heavily on her was no longer a constant source of anxiety. Instead, she had stability, and with that stability, she was able to focus on the things that truly mattered: her family, her career, and her future. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Madison sat down at the kitchen table reflecting on how far they had come. She thought about the struggles they had faced, the times when she had wondered if things would ever get better, and the overwhelming sense of hopelessness that had consumed her. But then she thought about the billionaire, the man who had changed everything for them. She thought about how he had believed in her when no one else had, and how that belief had given her the strength to keep going. It wasn't just the money. It was the encouragement, the mentorship, the reminder that she was worth more than just surviving. She was capable of thriving. As Madison sat in the quiet of the evening, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. The path to where she was now had been hard, but it had led her to a place of fulfillment. Her heart swelled with pride as she thought about the future, a future that no longer felt uncertain. For the first time, she truly felt like she was in control of her destiny. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was late, but when she opened the door, she was surprised to find the billionaire standing there. He had come to visit, and he was smiling. "I wanted to see how you're doing," he said, his voice warm and kind. "I've been thinking about you and your family." Madison invited him inside, and they sat down together. She was still in awe of how much her life had changed because of his belief in her. "We're doing great," she said with a smile, her heart full. "Better than I ever could have imagined." The billionaire nodded his eyes, reflecting pride and satisfaction. "I'm so proud of you, Madison. You've done more than I ever expected, and I knew you had it in you all along." Madison smiled softly. "I don't know where I'd be without you," she said, her voice sincere. "You gave me a chance when I had none, and that made all the difference." He looked at her, his expression serious yet gentle. "No, Madison. You gave yourself that chance. You took it, and you ran with it. That's all you." Madison felt tears welling up in her eyes. It wasn't just about the material things, the money, or the opportunities. It was the way he had made her believe in herself, the way he had shown her that she was capable of so much more than she had ever imagined. She had given everything she had to her family and her future, and now she was living a life she could be proud of. As they sat together talking about the future, Madison knew that her journey wasn't over. It was just the beginning. She had come a long way, but there was so much more she wanted to do, so much more she wanted to give. And with the confidence she had gained, she knew she would keep moving forward one step at a time towards a future filled with endless possibilities. Years had passed, and the path Madison had traveled seemed even more remarkable with time. The family had grown stronger, and Madison's determination had brought her to places she had never imagined. She had earned her teaching certification and was now working full-time at a school that not only appreciated her, but saw her as an invaluable member of their community. Her students admired her, and she had become a role model to them. She was more than just a teacher. She was someone who had lived through hardship, and they saw that. Her life, once filled with uncertainty, had found stability and purpose. Jack, who had once been frail and sickly, was now a healthy young boy full of energy and curiosity. He loved learning and was excelling in his studies. Lily, with her wide-eyed wonder, was thriving as well, her love for reading growing every day. Their laughter filled the apartment, a sound that used to seem like a distant dream. The billionaire's help had set them on this path, but it was Madison's relentless spirit, the same one that had fought through every difficult day, that had brought them here. The apartment had become more than just a roof over their heads. It was a home filled with warmth, love, and the promise of a future. Madison often found herself reflecting on how far they had come. She had been in a dark place once where survival seemed like the only goal. But now she was looking ahead, planning for more than just getting by. She was building a life, a legacy that would provide for her children long after she was gone. Her dreams of helping others, of becoming a teacher who made a difference, had come true. It wasn't easy. There were still struggles, still challenges that arose, but now Madison knew she could face them. She had been through so much and come out stronger on the other side. One afternoon, as she sat at the kitchen table grading papers, she looked up to see Jack and Lily playing in the living room. For a moment, everything felt perfect. The world outside might have been unpredictable, but in this small apartment, there was peace. As Madison watched her children, she thought back to that day when the billionaire had first appeared in their lives. She had never imagined that one act of kindness, one person believing in her, could change everything. It wasn't just the money that had transformed their lives, it was the belief in their potential, the belief that they deserved a chance. It was the power of someone saying, "I see you and I believe in you." And now, as Madison looked around at the life she had built, she understood something deeply important. That kind of belief was worth more than anything money could buy. It had changed everything for her family, for her children, and for the future she was now shaping for them. The future was no longer something uncertain or out of reach. It was something she could touch, something she could build with her own hands. And as long as she had hope and determination, there was nothing she couldn't achieve. Madison sat on the edge of her bed, looking out the window, the soft evening light casting a warm glow over the apartment. It had been several years since she had made the decision to change her life. And now, as she reflected on everything that had happened, she couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had come a long way from the days when she had barely been able to make ends meet, when every day had felt like a battle. Now she was thriving. She had a career, a future, and a family that was stronger than ever. Her relationship with her children, Jack and Lily, had only grown deeper. Jack, who had once been so fragile and ill, was now a confident young boy with a bright smile. Lily, always full of curiosity, was becoming more independent with each passing day. Madison was able to give them the things she had once only dreamed of. They had a stable home, food on the table every night, and the freedom to explore their dreams. Madison had made a promise to herself that she would never let them feel the fear she had once lived with, and she had kept that promise. But it wasn't just the material things that had changed. It was the sense of security and hope that had been woven into their lives. It was the knowledge that no matter what, they would always have each other. Madison had learned that the real key to happiness wasn't just about achieving success. It was about finding balance, about nurturing the relationships that mattered most, and about living each day with purpose. She had learned to prioritize her family, her own well-being, and her goals. One evening, as Madison was preparing dinner, she heard a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, so she wiped her hands on the towel and opened the door. Standing there was the billionaire, a familiar smile on his face. "Hello, Madison," he said warmly. "I thought I'd stop by and see how everything is going." Madison felt a rush of emotion as she smiled at him. "It's going great," she said. "I'm doing well, the kids are doing well. Things are really good." The billionaire's eyes lit up with pride as he looked at her. "I knew you would get here," he said. "You've always had it in you. You just needed a little push." Madison felt a lump form in her throat. She could never find the right words to thank him for everything he had done. He had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. His kindness had given her the strength to fight for a better life. "You gave me more than a push," she said softly. "You gave me a chance." The billionaire looked at her, his expression filled with warmth. "You took the chance, Madison. You made it happen." Madison's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. She had built the life she had always wanted, not just for herself, but for her children. She was living proof that change was possible, that no matter how dark the past, the future could always be brighter. As the evening sun faded and the apartment filled with the sounds of Jack and Lily laughing in the next room, Madison felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had come so far, and yet she knew there was still so much more ahead. With her family by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. Life, she realized, was full of endless possibilities, and she was ready to embrace every one of them. It had been years since Madison had taken that leap of faith, and now, as she looked at her life, she could hardly believe how far she had come. The apartment that once felt like a burden was now a true home filled with warmth, laughter, and the sound of children playing. Jack and Lily had grown up in ways that were nothing short of miraculous. Jack, who had once been frail and sickly, was now a healthy young boy thriving in school and full of energy. Lily, always the curious one, had blossomed into a bright and inquisitive young girl excelling in her studies and always asking questions about the world around her. Madison had not only provided for them, but had given them the kind of life that she had once thought was out of reach. She had made a promise to herself that she would never let them experience the struggles she had gone through. And now, as she watched them grow, she knew she had kept that promise. She had become the mother she had always wanted to be, strong, caring, and present. Her career as a teacher was thriving, and she had earned the respect and admiration of her colleagues and students alike. Every day she woke up with a sense of purpose, knowing that she was making a difference in the lives of the children she taught, just as someone had once made a difference in her life. One evening, as Madison sat at the kitchen table preparing dinner, she heard a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, so she wiped her hands on the towel and opened it. Standing there, as always, was the billionaire, his familiar smile lighting up the room. "Hi, Madison," he said, his voice warm and welcoming. "I thought I'd stop by and see how things were going." Madison smiled, feeling a mix of gratitude and emotion. "It's going great," she said. "The kids are doing well, and everything is going really well. I can't thank you enough for everything." The billionaire stepped inside, glancing around the room. He could see how much had changed, how far they had come. "You've done this, Madison," he said softly. "You've worked so hard, and now you're reaping the rewards." Madison felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had worked hard, yes, but she knew she couldn't have done it without the help of the billionaire. He had been the catalyst for change, the one who had believed in her when no one else had. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice full of emotion. "You gave me the chance to change everything. You made me believe in myself." The billionaire looked at her, his expression sincere. "You had it in you all along, Madison. You just needed someone to remind you of that." They stood there for a moment, a quiet understanding passing between them. Madison realized that the journey wasn't just about the help she had received. It was about the belief that had been instilled in her. That belief had become the foundation upon which she had built her new life, a life filled with hope, opportunity, and love. As the evening wore on, the billionaire stayed for dinner, chatting with Madison and the children, laughing and sharing stories. It felt like a family gathering, the kind Madison had never thought possible. As they sat together, she realized how far she had come. She had once felt like her life was out of control, but now, with the love of her family and the support of those who truly cared for her, she was in charge of her own destiny. And that, she thought, was the greatest gift of all. It had been a few more years since that fateful encounter, and Madison had come to realize something profound. She had built a life not just for herself, but for her children, one that was filled with purpose, security, and a sense of belonging. She was no longer the young woman struggling to survive on the streets. She was a confident, accomplished teacher, raising her children with love and care. Her home, once a small apartment filled with uncertainty, was now a place of warmth, laughter, and dreams. Jack, now a teenager, was excelling in school, his passion for science and learning growing each day. Lily, always full of energy and creativity, had developed a deep love for art and spent her free time drawing beautiful pictures. Madison watched them grow with pride, knowing she had given them a foundation that would allow them to build their own futures. One day as she was preparing dinner, she received a call from the billionaire. It had been a while since they last spoke, but she had never forgotten the impact he had on her life. She picked up the phone, her heart warming at the sound of his voice. "Madison," he said, his tone kind and familiar. "I've been thinking about you and the family. I just wanted to check in and see how everything is going." Madison smiled, her heart full. "Things are great," she said. "The kids are doing well. Jack's looking at colleges now, and Lily's doing great with her art. It's all coming together." The billionaire was silent for a moment, and then he spoke, his voice filled with pride. "I'm so proud of you, Madison. You've come so far, and you've done it all on your own. You've created a life for your children that's full of possibility. I couldn't be happier for you." Madison's eyes welled up with tears as she listened. She had come so far, and so much of it had been because of the support he had given her when she needed it most. But it was her own strength, her determination, that had truly carried her. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You gave me a chance, and that changed everything." The billionaire's voice was warm as he responded. "You did the hard work, Madison. You believed in yourself when it mattered. That's the real key to your success." As they continued to talk, Madison realized just how much her life had shifted. She was no longer living day by day, unsure of what the future would bring. She was planning for the long term, helping her children navigate their own paths. She had a career that she loved, and more importantly, she had a sense of peace she had never known. The life she had built was her own, and it was one she was incredibly proud of. As she ended the call with the billionaire, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She knew that their paths would always be connected, but more than that, she realized that the greatest gift he had given her was not just the financial support, but the belief that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. As she sat back and looked around her home, Madison smiled. The future was no longer uncertain. It was bright, and it was hers to shape. Madison stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her work clothes, ready to face another day. It was hard to believe how far she had come. The young woman who had once been desperate for survival now stood as a confident, accomplished teacher, balancing her career and motherhood. It wasn't just about the paycheck or the success she had achieved. It was about the life she had built with her own hands. It was a life she could look at with pride, knowing she had done it with the love and determination she had promised her children. Jack and Lily had grown into incredible young people full of dreams and potential. Jack had chosen a path in engineering inspired by his experiences overcoming health challenges, while Lily's love for art had begun to shape into something even bigger. Madison knew she had done everything in her power to give them the best chance at life. She had given them stability, love, and the freedom to chase their dreams. There was a sense of peace in knowing that. The day was just beginning, and Madison was ready to face it. She left the house and headed to the school where her students were waiting for her. As she walked into her classroom, the familiar faces of her students greeted her, eager to learn, eager to grow. Madison's heart swelled with pride. She had always dreamed of being a teacher, of making a difference in the lives of children, and now she was living that dream every day. She spent hours preparing lessons, making sure each one was meaningful and engaging. But it wasn't just about teaching academics. She was teaching them life lessons about perseverance, kindness, and the power of believing in themselves. After class, as Madison walked through the school's hallways, she ran into one of her colleagues, Mrs. Thompson. "Madison, I just wanted to say how much of an impact you're making here," Mrs. Thompson said, smiling. "The kids love you, and they are thriving under your guidance. You're truly doing something special." Madison felt a surge of emotion. She had worked so hard to get here, and hearing that her efforts were making a difference meant the world to her. "Thank you," she replied, smiling warmly. "I just want to give them the best education I can to show them they have so much potential." As she left work that evening, Madison reflected on how much had changed in her life. There had been struggles, there had been challenges, but there had also been moments of triumph and joy. Her children were thriving, her career was flourishing, and she was more than capable of handling anything that came her way. The future was full of promise. She had built this life with her own determination, with the support of the people who believed in her, and with the love of her family. She had learned that no matter where you start, no matter how difficult the journey, you have the power to change your life. And for the first time in years, Madison knew that the best was yet to come. It had been several years since Madison had taken control of her life, and now she was at a point where everything seemed to have fallen into place. She had a fulfilling career, a loving family, and a sense of pride that came from the life she had built. Her children, Jack and Lily, were growing up strong and independent, ready to take on the world. Jack, now a young adult, had decided to pursue a degree in engineering, inspired by his own journey of overcoming illness. Lily, always the creative spirit, was considering a future in graphic design, her passion for art growing every day. As Madison looked at her children, she couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. It wasn't just about the material things she had been able to provide for them. It was about the foundation of love, support, and belief that had shaped their futures. She had promised herself that she would give them a life that was filled with opportunity, and she had done just that. Her own path had been full of hardships, but she had turned those struggles into the driving force that pushed her forward. Every decision she made, every challenge she faced, was a step toward creating a life that was better than the one she had started with. And now, looking at her children, she could see that all her efforts had paid off. Madison stood in the kitchen one evening, preparing dinner, as Jack and Lily chatted excitedly about their school projects. It was moments like these that made everything feel right. The house was filled with laughter, and the future seemed as bright as the evening sun that filtered through the window. As she cooked, Madison reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the days when she had barely scraped by, when hope seemed out of reach. But everything had changed the moment she took a chance on herself, the moment she believed that she could create a different life. That belief had led her to where she was now, happy, fulfilled, and proud of everything she had accomplished. Later that evening, as the family sat down to dinner, Madison couldn't help but feel a deep sense of peace. The chaos of her past seemed so far away now, replaced by the calm of a life well lived. She had worked hard for everything she had, and every sacrifice had been worth it. Her children were thriving, and they had a mother who had shown them what it meant to fight for a better future. As they ate together, Madison realized that the most important lesson she had learned along the way wasn't just about success or material wealth. It was about resilience, love, and the power of believing in yourself no matter where you start. And now, as she looked around the table at her family, she knew that the future was theirs to shape. They were ready for whatever came next, and with each other by their side, they knew they could face anything. Madison's heart swelled with pride as she watched her children laugh and talk the promise of a bright future ahead of them. As Madison stood in the park watching her children play, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. It had been years since she had started this journey, and now here she was watching her kids grow into capable, confident young adults. Jack was off to college, pursuing his dream of becoming an engineer, and Lily, with her artistic talents, had been accepted into an art school. They were both excelling in their respective paths, and Madison couldn't have been prouder. But what truly filled her heart with gratitude was knowing that she had played a part in their success. She had worked tirelessly, sacrificing so much to ensure that they had the opportunities she never had. And now, as she stood there watching them thrive, she realized just how much her efforts had paid off. She had created a life for them that was filled with possibilities. It wasn't just the material things she had been able to give them. It was the belief she had instilled in them that they could achieve anything. As Madison continued to watch her children, her mind drifted back to the early days, to the moments when she felt lost, and uncertain. She remembered the struggle of trying to make ends meet, the sleepless nights, wondering how she was going to provide for her family. But she had never given up. She had always believed that if she worked hard enough, if she stayed determined, things would get better. And they had. The life she had now was the result of years of hard work, resilience, and the support she had received from those who believed in her. She had not only built a future for her children, but had also built a future for herself. Madison had gone from a place of survival to a place of purpose. She had found her passion as a teacher, inspiring the next generation of students to dream big and work hard, and she had done it all while raising two amazing children who had become the center of her world. As she watched them run and laugh, Madison couldn't help but smile. She had come so far, and she had done it with love, dedication, and a belief in herself that had never wavered. She had learned that no matter where you start, no matter how difficult the journey may seem, it is always possible to create a life that is filled with love, purpose, and success. The future was bright for her family, and for the first time she could say with certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As Madison sat at the kitchen table one quiet evening, she reflected on the years that had passed. It was hard to believe how much had changed. She had grown not only as a person, but also as a mother, a professional, and a role model. The challenges she had faced in the past seemed so distant now, and yet they had shaped her into the strong, capable woman she had become. Her children were thriving, following their own paths with confidence, and she could see the fruits of her labor in the way they carried themselves. Jack, now well into his college years, was excelling in his engineering studies, and Lily, her creative spirit always shining through, was building a portfolio that was starting to catch the attention of professionals in the art world. Madison couldn't help but feel proud. She had given them the foundation they needed to succeed, but they were taking it and building their own futures. It was a feeling of pride she had never thought she would experience. She had always wanted more for her children, and now she was seeing that more come to life. Madison thought about the billionaire who had played such a pivotal role in their lives. He had given her a chance when she had nothing, believing in her potential when she couldn't see it herself. It had been that belief more than anything that had made the difference, but it was her own determination, her refusal to accept anything less than a better life for her family, that had turned that opportunity into reality. As she looked around her home filled with laughter and love, Madison knew that the journey was far from over. There would always be challenges ahead, but she had learned that she was strong enough to face them. With her children by her side and a future full of possibilities, she was ready for whatever came next. The future was bright, and she had no doubt that they would continue to grow and thrive together. Madison sat in her living room, watching her children prepare for their respective futures. Jack was at the kitchen table, buried in textbooks, as he worked on his college assignments, while Lily sat on the couch, sketching her latest design ideas in her sketchpad. As Madison looked at them, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. These were the moments she had worked so hard for, the moments that made every sacrifice worth it. The life they had now was a far cry from the uncertain, struggle-filled days they had once known. She had always known that their journey would be filled with challenges, but she had also known that together they could overcome anything. The support she had given them and the opportunities she had fought for had set them on a path where anything was possible. Madison thought back to the times when she felt lost and overwhelmed, when she had no idea how she was going to make it through another day. It seemed so long ago now, but those memories were the foundation of the strength she had today. They were the fuel that had driven her to push forward, to keep going no matter how difficult it became. She had made a life for herself and her children, not because it was easy, but because she had refused to give up. She had built a future for them, and as she watched them grow, she knew it had all been worth it. She had taught them the importance of hard work, perseverance, and believing in themselves. And now she was seeing them put those lessons into practice. As she sat back and watched her children, Madison realized something important. This was just the beginning. Their futures were wide open, and the possibilities were endless. There would always be challenges ahead, but Madison knew they were ready to face them. Together, they had already overcome so much, and the future was theirs to shape. As Madison sat at the kitchen table sipping her coffee and listening to the sound of her children getting ready for the day, she felt a deep sense of contentment. Life had a way of surprising her, always turning challenges into opportunities for growth. Looking at Jack now, an ambitious young adult preparing for his next step into the world of engineering, and Lily, her heart full of passion for art, Madison realized just how much had changed. The days of uncertainty, the constant struggle to make ends meet, seemed like a distant memory. The hardships that had once defined her life now served as the foundation for the resilience and determination that had brought her here. The lessons she had learned along the way were not only for herself, but had shaped the lives of her children as well. They were growing up with confidence, with the belief that they could accomplish anything they set their minds to, and Madison knew that they would go on to create their own paths, just as she had done. As she watched them gather their things and leave for school, Madison felt a quiet pride in her heart. She had built this life for them. She had fought for every opportunity, every chance, and now she could see the fruits of that labor in the lives of her children. They were no longer burdened by the struggles she had once faced. They had the freedom to dream, to explore, and to become the people they were meant to be. Madison couldn't help but think back to the moment when she had been given that first chance, the moment when someone had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. She had made that belief her own, and it had carried her through the toughest of times. Now, as she looked at her children, she saw the same potential in them, a potential she knew they would fulfill. The future was theirs to shape, and Madison was more certain than ever that they would create something beautiful. With a smile on her face, she took another sip of her coffee, ready for whatever came next. Life had a way of surprising her, but now she knew she was ready to face it all with the same courage and determination that had brought her this far. Did this story leave a lasting impression on you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tap the end screen to see another heartwarming story waiting for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Until our next story.